Dungeons and Data Tables. Thank you for joining this seminar, combining two of my geekiest pastimes, playing tabletop RPGs and building complicated spreadsheets for things. So what I hope you are able to get out of this is some practical advice for making character sheets, maybe a little bit about some campaign dashboard type stuff, but basically incorporating business applications into your fun time hobbies in a way that, hopefully makes them both better. So things we're going to talk about: why you might want to use a spreadsheet for these things, why you might not want to. There's pros and cons involved. Big focus will be on building character sheets because I think that's where I have the most useful advice to share. Some considerations for user interface design. And then automation, I think, is probably the biggest, meatiest topic here for us. Some ways of doing that and so that you can actually understand how things work when you come back to it a few months later, which is always a challenge with these kinds of things. A little bit about me. I think everybody here probably knows me to some extent. So my name is Jim, but most people call me Jim. Thank you. I'm one of the moderators on the server here. My background: I used to be a software developer. I've since transitioned into product management, so mostly I just talk about work that other people do. RPGs started playing in the 90s, mostly D&D type stuff. My first experience with trying to use spreadsheets for this, I built an AD&D second edition character sheet in Quattro Pro for DOS, and this would have been like 1993, 94 maybe. It was probably crap. It did not work very well. I was a kid. More recently started making like campaign dashboards to help manage things, like running. I did a couple of open table mega dungeon campaigns with a lot of different players coming and going, and I needed a way of keeping track of who was what level, how much treasure everyone had, things of that nature. And then moved on from that to, I don't even really like using Roll20. The character sheet options aren't for me. I'm just going to start using Google Sheets for this. Now, I would describe myself as a VTT skeptic, but I'm not against using them at all. I think you can do really cool stuff. It's just a lot of times what comes with this is this need to make use of all of the things that a VTT has and have this full-on immersive experience with the tokens and the map and the sound effects. And that could be really cool. But as a GM, I don't really want to spend my time setting that up. I'd rather, fortunately or unfortunately, spend my time in a spreadsheet. And again, this will be using Google Sheets as the example. I think a lot of this will carry over to other apps. Like if you use Excel, there's a web version of that. Apple Numbers has some pretty neat stuff about it. And the examples are all D&D-ish OSR kind of stuff because that's what I'm familiar with. That's what I play. But I do hope if you don't play those kinds of games, you still get some use out of the information today. All right. Any questions before we get started in here? I mean, you could be reading ahead if you want to. Cool. All right, so why do you want to do this? Well, you don't want a full VTT experience like I was talking about, but or maybe you are playing in a game. Like the first campaign dashboard I saw in a spreadsheet was built by a player in a game that I was also playing in. The GM didn't build it. It was a player who decided, okay, here's where we're going to track XP for ourselves and our hirelings and all the treasure and expenses. I think we ended up putting spell books in there, even though we were using Roll20 for most of the rest of the game. You want to be able to collaborate or share information with the players or GMs. So if everybody has their sheets up or there's a campaign dashboard that everybody can get to and look at the same time, that is immensely helpful, particularly if you have new players that you're trying to introduce to a system. If you can actually see their character sheet and help them fill it out, that is huge. You already are good at using spreadsheets for other kinds of stuff, so it's kind of just using the tools you know. Just out of curiosity, how many people here would consider yourselves like advanced spreadsheet users? Like, yeah, no, you would? Okay. Some of the stuff we talk about might be review. Some of it might be completely new to you. If at any point I'm going too fast or too slow, just let me know. Like if I'm saying things everybody knows, I can hurry along. If I'm kind of going too fast over something that's a bit complicated, just put your hand up. I'll slow down and we'll take it from there. Another reason to use spreadsheets, you like building your own tools. There's certainly like an intellectual challenge involved. It's kind of like doing puzzles. But you're not a programmer, or you're a programmer and you're lazy and you don't want to build every single thing from scratch, which I would say describes me. I sometimes look at these sheets and like, I could build a web app that would do most of this. That's not how I want to spend all my time. I can do it faster here and it will be fine. Not wanting to do it, hey, maybe you really do like that immersive VTT experience and that's what you want to go for. So you're better off spending your time setting that up in Foundry, right? Spreadsheets, they're kind of clunky solution to the problem. They're not great at any particular thing. They're a general purpose tool, and it's hard to make them look whimsical, or whatever tone you're trying to set can be a challenge. Yeah, if you really don't like writing spreadsheet formulas and like formatting cells and getting all nitpicky with it, this may not be for you. And if you are a programmer and you really want to go build that killer app for tabletop role-playing games, you do you. Go do it. There's some resources here. Thanks, you'll look. The first one's a video. It's a few years old from Joel Spolsky about, it's called You Suck at Excel. So you can imagine what the tone is, but it really goes into how to build a good spreadsheet using things like index and match for table lookups, named ranges. Some of the tips that I am going to share here are things that I learned from watching this video. There's a link to the list of functions available for Google Sheets, which is always good for reference, or also just mining it for ideas of things that you can use. And there's also a link to Sean actually found on Blue Sky a conversation about doing exactly this, building character sheets. It was focusing on like formatting them, making them look nice. And so there's some inspirational screenshots in there where someone went really kind of above and beyond, like placing images for borders and like picking a lot of different typefaces to try to set a tone. That's more than I would typically do. I think it ends up being a little bit clunky, but screenshots look cool. So you can push the appearance of Google Sheets pretty far if you want to put a lot of work into doing so. Overall process. And I kind of had to think about how I've actually gone about doing this in the past to make this list. I almost always start with scratch sheet. It's all throwaway stuff. This is where I'm trying out ideas. I'm trying out different formatting options. As I'm adding automation, I'm trying out formulas and figuring out the best way to do things. And then I can go apply that to the actual sheet that I'm building. So just a place to experiment. There is one on this in this spreadsheet. I haven't actually used it on this one. So if you want to go play around with anything, that one's open up. And then decide on conventions for UI UX design. How do I want to actually lay things out? How do I want to format them? And I do this really early because Google Sheets is terrible at helping you with this. You cannot really easily make changes to formatting for a big character sheet once you're really far along. So spending a bit of time up front deciding how you want things to work really pays off. Then I'll create, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you get pretty far along in building a sheet and then just decide, you know what, I don't actually like the font and size that I used for labels. Well, now I have to find every single label in this sheet and then select it and change the formatting options for it because there isn't a way to define a label style. Yeah, right. Yeah, so Google Docs has that. I think Excel does. Apple Numbers does. Google Sheets doesn't. If you know somebody that works on the Google Sheets team and want to complain to them, I would appreciate it. I'm gonna. He might. Yeah, Mirko might know the people responsible. So we'll see. And so yeah, I'll build up that blank character sheet with everything laid out in a way that I think makes sense, and then I'll start working on automation. And really, I'm probably doing this section by section. Like, okay, what are the fields that are part of this section that the player definitely needs to put a value in themselves? They need to fill this part out. What are the parts that, based on what they've already put in, I can just fill in automatically for them? So that's a whole topic we'll get into. If I need to use lookup tables, which we'll also get into, I'll usually create another sheet for that, call it data, and that's where all of my tables will live. And then I'll just keep building and refining these sections of the character sheet until it's finished. I mean, nothing's ever actually completely finished, but it's enough that I'm going to, give it to my players to break. And then I protect the blank sheet and make copies of it for each new character as they're coming in. So it sounds like a lot. It's kind of just whatever workflow makes sense for you is the right one. This is just how I go about doing it. And this is all about character sheets. So campaign dashboards are also really neat. I won't have as much to say about them today, just because it's really kind of up to what are your goals for it. So I mentioned I did an open table, a few open table campaigns where I'd have a number of different players with different characters. Some of them had multiple characters, and I needed to keep track of who played in which session, how much XP they each got, what were they spending their money on. I think I even set up like they had a company that they could put funds into to buy things that would benefit the whole party, and we could keep track of like what their goals were and all of that stuff. And that was very specific to that game. And I set it up so that it was easy for each session to put in what happened in that particular session, who the players were, and then have an overall view that would tell me like, okay, here's what level all of the players are. Here's who's alive and who's dead. Here's how much money's in the coffer. I even had a little pie chart breaking down like where they were earning their experience points from, just because it was easy to do. But for your game, you probably have different goals and like have different information that you care about tracking. I do hope some of the advanced stuff, some of the formulas and things of that nature that we get into will help you out with that. But I won't have a whole lot of specific advice. We can probably take some time closer to the end and take a look at that campaign tracker that I built, which might be interesting. But the main focus, I think, will be on character sheets today. So anything else? Okay. Next tab. I think the design and user experience of a character sheet in a spreadsheet is the most important thing. And if you only have a bit of time, spend it on this and don't worry about automation at all. If you have a nice looking sheet that all people can do is just put information in manually, that's often enough. So yeah, this is where to spend more time if you only have a little bit. But I don't have a whole lot of real advice for it. I can show you some examples of the kinds of things that I tend to design, but things you'll need to consider, and this is where that scratch sheet comes in place pretty early on. You can try out different color combination stuff, but you'll need to decide what fonts am I using. You probably only need one or two and a few different sizes and weights. what colors, how I want to organize the information, how should the inputs, the places the players need to enter information, how should those look? Because you want to make those parts clear so that they know where they need to go next when they're creating their characters. How do you want to display calculated fields? So if you have formulas for automation for things, you probably want those to look different than the fields that a player needs to fill in. And also white space. There's sometimes a tendency to want to cram as much information as densely as possible. Fight against that. It makes everything a lot easier to use if there's a bit of room to breathe and you can find where things are. We've mentioned a little bit earlier, Google Sheets gives you a lot of formatting tools, but they're very primitive, and it does not help you at all in terms of defining styles and making sure you're using them consistently. So that is why you want to spend time on this up front. So first thing I usually do is set up an actual grid. And this is because if you try to just use single cells for everything and you want to resize your columns and your rows so that it fits the information, that means everything else that's in that column or that row has to also be the same size. So, if I would decide I'm going to break my heart here, I have something here that needs to be this wide. Well, now every single thing that's underneath it or above it also needs to be that width, right? So what I'll typically do, select the entire sheet, just make everything, if you adjust one cell while all of the columns are together, you'll set them all to the same size. I try to get them roughly square. It doesn't have to be exact. And then if you want, then you can combine those. You can merge cells to get larger fields. Like these are just some various size fields here. A couple tricks for that. Let's say I want 4 rows of fields that are each 3 columns wide. Up here, merge horizontally, and now I have that. I don't have to do them. Merge these 3 cells, merge these 3 cells. Now you can do it all at once with that. Likewise, if you don't like what you've done, unmerge, try again. A lot of people know left aligned, right aligned, center aligned. You also have vertical alignment up here. I usually select everything and on a page and set it to middle. And unless there's a reason not to, sometimes I'll go in and something looks a little odd or it makes sense for it to be top aligned or bottom aligned, and then I'll manually change those. But I default to making everything centered vertically. Google Sheets does have the concept of a theme. It's fairly limited, but what you can do is you can pick one of these existing ones, whatever's closest to what you want to do, customize it. The options you have are somewhat limited, but basically what this will give you is the ability to set what's the default font. So I'll show you why that matters in a minute. And you can set up this color palette so you easily have some colors that you can pick from as you are formatting things. You also have the ability to add other custom colors, but I find this is a pretty easy place to set it up. One thing I do like doing when I am doing this is if I'm making a sheet for a particular setting or game that has a tone that I like, I'll open up the PDF for that rule book. And if you're on Apple, I don't know if there's something like this for Windows, but if you're on a Mac, there's a digital color meter app that you can open up. And then wherever you place the mouse, it will tell you the hex number for that color so that you can pull that out and make use of it. So these colors are actually from the Dolman Wood book because that's the system I've been playing with most recently. So these are just the base colors that I'm going to use for, all the stuff I'm doing. A thing I will point out now, and then I'll show you kind of how to fix it. there's not a lot of options here. You get 6 not very inspiring font choices in this little drop down. There is a way to get around that. Here it is. Default fonts suck. This is advanced stuff. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but you can go to extensions, apt script, and this is where you can write some JavaScript functions that will do magical things with your spreadsheets. You can do all kinds of cool stuff with this that I'm not going to bother with right now. But one thing you can do is actually change the default font to something that isn't listed. I'll just give this a name. Doesn't really matter. This is also if you want to build something that like can be put in as like an extension for other people using Google Sheets to pull in. It can do that, but for your own personal use, you don't have to do anything like that. And then I'm going to trying to remember what is the next step. Do I need to actually deploy it? I'm trying to remember now. Oh, okay. I just had to save the project. Unlike other places in Google Apps, you actually have to click a save button. And I have this set default font function. What it's doing is whatever spreadsheet this script belongs to, get its theme, and then set the font to, for this one, I'm using one called XR. You can, probably already know there's more fonts up here. You can find ones for any kind of use. Basically, you just take that name, put that in there, and then run it. Authorization required. It's going to be, there's this big scary choose an account thing. It shows you this warning saying it has access to sensitive information. I don't care. I just wrote this. It's not some hacker trying to steal my stuff. Sorry. The screen recording will show all the things I just did, but it won't show up here. So execution completed. Now, why that matters is if I do something as innocuous as grab this and drag it somewhere else, by default, this all gets set to like whatever font I have set up here, like you can see XR, this gets reset to the default font, which happens to be, because I ran that, XR. So basically it keeps you from having like, oh, I move something around and now for some reason I have Arial showing up in my nice looking sheet. It does. It does. So so the question was, does the theme affect the default font? It does. But as I showed just a second ago, if you're just going in from here, like right now, see there's no font here. Unless you want to use one of these 6 everywhere. Yeah, it is just one of those. And if you don't like those, this is the way you make it so that the default for the theme is up there. Yep. And again, it's an obnoxious like hurdle to get over, and it's more of a convenience than anything. You can always just, I'm not going to do it because I'm actually using a couple different typefaces, but you can also just select the entire sheet and then pick the font you want and just make a habit of doing that regularly. I'm actually using a different font for some headings here, so I don't want to do that right now. And again, another rant because I never get tired of complaining about it. It's up to you to maintain consistency on the formatting here, unfortunately. So They do. It's just, yeah, they don't have styles, and it's annoying. A couple other tips for as you're laying things out. I'll go through these and then I'll show you an example of a sheet that I built recently. You can start with a paper or PDF sheet for as inspiration for how to lay things out and how to sort of design things. Just keep in mind the user experience for filling things out on paper is different from using a spreadsheet. And in a spreadsheet, you don't always have to be clever. And I like this example. The Dolman Wood character sheet is awesome in a lot of ways. I really like the inventory section because they have some optional rules for slot-based encumbrance. And it's a little hard to see here, but basically, if you start filling in your equipment, you can use this in the center there are movement rates. And as you fill up slots, it will show you what your movement rate is based on how many slots are filled. It's really cool. Yeah. Yeah, it's great. And there's also space if you want to like track weight in coins because you're still living in 1981 or whatever. But it's also completely unnecessary for your spreadsheet. If you're building a character sheet in there, because hey, you have formulas. You can just calculate this stuff with math. You don't have to do analog calculator on paper. So great design for paper. You don't need to recreate it in your sheet. And there's probably examples of that kind of stuff in some of the nicer character sheets you see for paper. In terms of organizing information, general principles, group related information into sections and give them a label or a heading. Sections that are going to be used together often, try to place them near each other so players don't have to like keep searching like I'm up here and then I'm all way over here and I have to scroll around to find everything. No, just try to keep things grouped somewhat logically. So example, we just saw inventory and movement rates usually near each other. Armor and hit points both come up all the time in combat. Throw saving throws into that pile as well. You can see here, and I'll go to this full sheet in just a second. Combat, like here's all my attack stuff and ammunition and bonuses. And then nearby I also have hit points, what kind of armor, saving throw targets, just keeping all of the related information nearby. So when we're in combat, people aren't having to scramble to find things. I also recommend leaving blank spaces. On a regular paper character sheet, you got margins and little spaces where you can just write. You got to account for that in your character sheet if you're building in a spreadsheet. So there's this big blank space underneath save targets. If there's some sort of special modifier that only applies sometimes, that's where you could put that in. Similarly, if there's something affecting your hit points, like you took temporary damage, subdual damage or something, maybe that goes there. Stuff that doesn't come up often, but you want to, account for it. Like this character gets a +2 to armor class versus large creatures, for example. I think that's it. I'm going to switch over to the character sheet I built for Dolman Wood, and apologies, I would make the window bigger, but recording. So again, labeled sections, sort of grouped together. Everything, one convention I like is change the white background and then make the things that a player needs to fill in white and with a little bit of a subtle border. And that makes it stand out. So I know, okay, I need to go put in a name for the player, starting experience or whatever's awarded. There's drop downs here for kindred and class, alignment. By the way, if you don't know how to do drop downs like that, that is go to data validation. And now I need to find where that actually comes from. I think, nope. Basically, data validation. I'll just use alignment there. You can basically just list the values that you want to allow for that field. Advanced options, you can try to change the style a bit. I usually just do a little arrow, and that's how you get the little drop down so that they can select a particular value. Level is calculated, so is XP bonus. There's some formulas there that we can kind of dig into in a little bit when we get to it. But you'll see those don't have the white background. They're just calculated for you. Likewise, once you know the class and level, you know what the saving throws are. Inventory, again, the speed up here is calculated automatically based on what's going on in these boxes. Another thing, Dolmenwood, if you haven't taken a look at it, it's based on BX, but the classes are all fairly complicated, and so are the kindreds, which is, the new phrase for what we used to call race back in the bad old days. They each have like a list of these traits that are associated with them, and I'll talk more about this when we get into automation, but a lot of making a character, particularly for every edition of D&D that I've ever seen, is make 2 or 3 choices and then look up a value, copy it onto your sheet, look up a value, copy it onto your sheet. That is exactly the kind of stuff that you should try to automate. And so if I go up here and change, okay, instead of a wood grew, I want to be a Breggle. Hey, look, now I just have these 2 traits for Breggles. And that's based on, kindred and level. There's some filtering from tables going on there. And likewise, I have class traits. That'll change if I change classes up here. All stuff that just gets populated automatically. But this portrait up here is a wood grew. By the way, I like to make a place somewhere on the sheet so the players can put in a portrait, and then that's insert image in cell is how you would do that. Then I also gave a big free form. Here's where you can put your spell descriptions and stuff. I admit at that point I was getting a little bit lazy. The other kind of neat thing in this sheet, and this involves a bunch of app script stuff that I'm not going to get into, there is a dice tray because I didn't know if all of my players actually had dice, and I'm not using a full VTT. So is it going to work? Yeah. You click these check boxes and it will roll dice. You can set up custom die rolls down here, and there's some app script running to make that part work. That's just me showing off. And then I think that's most of what I want to talk about here, but you'll see there's conventions that I follow everywhere. Every section has this darker background heading with bold font in a particular size. Input fields are white. Explanatory labels are in smaller italic type. Like, all of those are decisions that you end up making during the sort of design phase and want to try out. And I probably made 2 or 3 blank sheets for this before I finally settled and went through and finished it up. So it's fine to take time on these things. All right, anything about UI design, UX, that kind of stuff before I move on to adding automation? Mm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, so So basically, maintaining consistency as you're designing a system in this case, and making sure that if you make an update in one place, like any other sort of connected assets also updated. Right. Yeah. 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 So depending on how you're going about writing, if you're like writing it in Google Docs, and you can use Sheets and like basically pull information from that into there. I will point out, we won't have time to get into it. You can, I don't know how helpful it will be for your particular situation, but you can actually in Google Docs define variables, and then reference them. You do like at sign name of the variable, and it will plug in whatever value you have. And that's one way that you can set make changes across the board for a particular thing. So if you have like a variable called fireball damage, and you change it from 5d6 to 6d6, then everywhere you used at fireball damage in your document would get updated. So that's a pretty neat feature that's I think introduced relatively recently in Google Docs. Um, yeah, worth considering. Uh, yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Right. Yep. Yeah. So that's. So the question was how did I have like a different sized, like a larger area for like a character image? So that is merged cells up here, and that is, so I have my grid set up. You know, every column's this width, and every row is this height, and then I can select a larger area, and then up here is merge cells, and there's different ways you can merge it: horizontally, vertically, merge all, and basically that just gives you a bigger box to work in. Yep. And yeah, yeah. So these are merged cells, and it lets you basically take a bunch of smaller areas and combine them into one big area that you want to put something into. And there's some nuance to it when you get into like writing formulas involving them that I'll talk about. But yeah, that's just right up here next to borders, merge cells. Okay, automation. This is kind of the big, meaty, technical topic today. So automation here, what I'm really talking about is, I mentioned, especially in D&D, but in some other systems as well, a lot of character creation and filling out the character sheet is just looking things up and then copying them onto your sheet. Um, we're using computers. They can do that work for us. You just have to figure out how to ask them to do it. Um, and benefits of doing this, I've mentioned, like if you are getting new players up and running, you want them to be able to create their own characters for your online game, and you're not sitting there next to them at the table. This gives you a way to help them out, and also like you using the spreadsheet means you'll be able to see what they're doing, but also having automation means they don't need to keep going back and forth between the book and their sheet and remembering where they were. And I think you've probably all been through this. Like if you're learning a new system, making a character the first couple times takes a while, and then after you've done it enough, it's really fast. This makes it even faster. It's also great if you're making a bunch of pre-gens. I've done this kind of character sheet spreadsheet for con games. Works great. So anything that the player doesn't choose, has dictated to them by the GM, or needs to roll randomly for, you can probably automate with some amount of effort. So you're not going to automate like what's their character class, how much XP do they start with? Sometimes if I want to have, a higher level party for a particular one shot, I'll say you all start with 5,000 XP. Just plug that value in, and whatever class you choose, it will tell you what level you are. Or if you have random tables involved, they'll still have to do that stuff. But everything else, so some examples, D&D, you have ability score modifiers. Those depend just on the ability score. So if you have a strength of 13, it's a +1, that kind of stuff. Level depends on class and XP, unless you're using a newer edition of D&D, and then it's just XP. Saving throws determined entirely by class and level. Attack modifier is a whole can of worms because there's all kinds of situations that can modify it. Armor class for Dolmen Wood, armor and dexterity. Also, friars are kind of like monks that, they get natural AZ bonuses over time, so you have to account for that if someone's a friar. And I'll say going through character creation process for a rule system and figuring out what these dependencies are and how these different values connect with each other is a good way of learning the mechanics of a system and getting really familiar with it. And then figuring out how to translate that into formulas in a spreadsheet can be a fun puzzle if you're a particular kind of nerd like I am. I'm not building these because it's not fun. If you try going down this path and find it's not fun, then don't do it. Nobody needs to actually do this. It's all optional. So we'll start with a really basic example here, adding simple automation, ability score modifiers. So these can be complicated in older editions, but a lot of them have this single table. You have a score, you have a modifier, and it's easy enough to express on the table. And you can have on your sheet, okay, here's my score, and then just have the players put in manually. I have a 16 in Constitution, so that's a 2. I'm going to show you a thing real quick. It's down here. If you just try to, in a random cell, put in +2, it'll look like 2, but you'll notice up here it puts an equal sign in front of it. It thinks it's a formula. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to show a bonus, right? So what you want to do actually is format number. I've already defined it, but you can define a custom number format. And you're never going to remember this. Like there's a help document that tells you how to write these. But essentially it's +, this little pound symbol is whatever the number is, semicolon, then this is how you want negative numbers to look, and this is how you want 0 to look. So if you just copy and paste this, it's called a hashtag. Yeah, that's an octothorpe. And it will give you examples of what positive, negative, and 0 is. So I once you do this in one of your spreadsheets, it's there for all of them. So you basically just do this once, and then when you want to have a place on your character sheet that's a bonus or penalty, choose this format for it. Saves you a lot of grief. Okay, that's aside. Okay, so this is pretty simple automation. There's only this number only depends on this number, and we can write a formula for it. And that's what's happening on the right side here. Here is the formula that I'm using. There's a lot of repetition in it. That makes it kind of look big and scary. But basically to put in a formula, what you do is equal sign, and then you start writing your formula. In this case, it's ifs is a built-in function. It takes these pairs of conditions and values. And in this case, I'm looking at, I think I had this in a different place. It was supposed to be this cell that I'm working with. Yeah, so it'd be 2,9. I'm going to get into named ranges, which really helps with this part in a bit. But basically, if this number is less than 4, then the value should be -3. Otherwise, if it's less than 6, it should be -2. If it's less than 9, it should be -1, and so on, so on. You get it. The last case is a default. You can just put in true. And what's going to happen is Google Sheets is going to look at this value, go through all of these cases, all of these conditions until one of them is true. So we have 13 here. It's not less than 4. It's not less than 6. It's not less than 9. It's not less than 13. It is less than 16. So therefore we have a +1. Okay. And you can see here's that formula right up here. This is fine. There's some issues with it. We'll get to those. But do I need to do anything else about using the formula here? This is, yeah, okay. And then once you fill in a formula in one place, Google Sheets will use some of its built-in intelligence to say, okay, you probably meant to also fill in these ones, which is fine. And then, hey, now you have all of your ability score modifiers calculated automatically. Great. I do use a convention in this sheet outside of these data tables. This kind of tan background means these are automatically filled in. These are automated fields. You don't have to do anything with them. Any sort of code examples involving formulas are in this monospace font in blue, boxed off, just conventions that I'm following. Another thing, if you're ever looking at a sheet and you're unsure which values are calculated, which ones aren't, control backtick, and it is control even on Mac. If you look right here, you're toggling between showing the formula in line so you can see. I think it's most useful if like you just do it quickly and look for the flicker, and that's where your automation is. Just a little thing. And there's also up in the view menu. Oh, thing I probably should have mentioned in the UI design. View, show, grid lines. If you were wondering why there weren't grid lines, it's because I turned them off. So that show menu is helpful. Naming things for clarity. Okay, so I had that U9, U29 thing going on before. You can actually give a cell or a range of cells a name that you can then use to refer to it later on. And this is huge. If you don't get anything else from this seminar, I hope you start using named ranges, and later on I'll show you how to name formulas. Actually, I think it's actually also on this slide. But naming things makes it much clearer. So you can focus on, okay, up here, if I'm clicking around, I'm like, I see this formula up here, and I kind of have to guess what it means. Like, I know that it's an ability score modifier, but nothing about just looking at these numbers and symbols and stuff tells me that. I just have to understand that's what it is. If I give it a name, then, I can say, name the cell that the score's in strength score. Well, now when I look at the formula, I can say, okay, now it's doing something with the strength score. It's looking at it, comparing it to these numbers, and then giving me a value. It's a modifier. That's cool. Here's how you do that. Pick anything, any range. I'll just use this paragraph up here. There's a name box up here. Click on it, type in a name. I'm just going to call it example range. And now anywhere else, I can start typing in a formula like, yeah, why not? Len is a built-in formula that tells me the length of some text. And now example range is right here. And I could type that in instead of like, clicking down here and having a cell reference. I don't know what it is. I'm looking for the, or I'm not. Oh, I didn't complete it. And this is where we're going to get into merge cells. Can cause some problems. But Let's see if I can do columns. Yep. See, and I'll do this one instead. I'll use columns. It will tell us how many columns are in this range. There's 19 columns in that range, right? The other place you can see this, data named ranges. You'll see I have a bunch of them set up for this. But here's example range. You can also add new ones up here. This is a great way for keeping things organized and making sure that when you write a formula, you make good stuff. So when I'm building a character sheet, I'm defining named ranges for basically all of the fields because I might want to use them later on for automation. And this also helps when you get to like rearranging things and moving them around, making sure your cell references don't get broken, your formulas keep working, and you can kind of tell what they're doing more easily. The other thing, go ahead, Wayne. There is. There is. I will. Yeah. Next slide. No problem. Yep. No worries. The other thing you can do is, okay, I have this formula. I'm using it with a named range, which is great. I don't want to have to look at all this logic for how the value is actually calculated. I just want to know what it's supposed to represent. You can create a named function that then you can use like built-in functions from any formula. So I think I don't know if I've already done this one. I don't think I have. So what I'm going to do is go up here. Here's where I have that formula. Right click, view more cell actions, define named function. Okay, right click, more cell actions, define named functions. They buried it. They shouldn't have. It's a great feature. Give it a name. I think I called it ability modifier. It will use all caps. This is not a case sensitive application. So when you are putting in the formulas in your spreadsheet, you can use lowercase and it's fine. I'll just call it ability mod. You can add help text. So you saw like when I start typing a formula, it displayed some help text. You can put in comments here that will show up as well. Right. It takes an, yep. Yep. Because you can have a parameter. So the argument here, score, I'm going to replace everywhere that says U29 with score. And then it's not specific to strength. It is whatever ability score I pass to this function, I will get back the modifier for it. The ability score, here's an example. Everybody knows 18 is the best. And now here's my name function, ability score, and I will go ahead and replace that in here. So equal ability mod. Hey, here's my nice help text. And I haven't named this range, so I'll just say U29. It does the same thing, but now when I look at the formula, I can say, yep, this is calculating an ability modifier. Don't even need to think about it. Now I want to apply it everywhere else. So I copied with Command C. I'm on a Mac. Edit, paste special, formula only. I don't want to change the formatting and border for all of the other ones. And now look. And I could go ahead and call this ability strength. That's fine. And then I can update this to also. Now, you don't have to prefix them with like ability strength, ability. intelligence. It can help if you have a lot of named ranges to kind of namespace or categorize them. So that list of named ranges is always alphabetical. So things that are that start with the same prefix will be next to each other, which can be helpful when you're going through here. But ability mod for my strength ability. Great. That is so much clearer than this formula here, right? So name things for clarity. I use this constantly all the time. It is the number one way to save yourself a lot of headache and heartbreak down the road. I recommend, playing around with this and figuring it out, making use of it. Merge cells. So I mentioned there's some downsides for it. You saw an error earlier when I tried to use a formula that expected a single cell and it got a whole range. So thing to keep in mind here, merge cells hold a single value like a regular cell, but they're actually an entire range. And you can see that if I click here, up here in this little name box, E67 to F68, that is the top left and bottom right corner of this range. So if I name this, by default, what I'm naming is this entire range and not just the part that has a value. And the value in a merge cell is in the top left corner in the demonstration here. So here's my merge cell. Over here, I have the 4 cells that make it up. And you can see I just did E equals E67. That's the address of the top left corner. The value here is here. The other ones, all empty. So when you're making named ranges, a thing I recommend doing, if it's only supposed to hold a single value, you want to edit it. You can go into named ranges. Where's that example range? I can edit this, and basically I just want the very first cell that's in that range done. And now if I want to do equal length of example range, it won't vomit out an error anymore. It'll just tell me that there's 98 characters there, which is vital information. So yeah, and here's an example. So this is a good named range. Here's a bad named range. The good named range is just F55 or I moved this one to F75. So it's this upper left corner. The bad named range is the entire range that this merge cell encompasses. And what I have up here is a formula. If you ever want to stick 2 bits of text together in a spreadsheet, you put things in quote marks, ampersand, and then like the cell reference. So this is basically pasting together. This named range is space, whatever is in good named range, wherever that is, and then a period at the end. That ampersand is how you paste strings together. Whereas over here, we have that value error because when you use the ampersand, it's expecting a single cell, and what I gave it was a whole range of cells. So yeah, again, when you define a name range, if it's only supposed to represent a single value, go in, just delete everything from the colon on. So it's just the first cell in the range and things will start working again. Man, I am going to have to pick this up, and we are getting into more complicated stuff. So the ability score formula is simple enough, but a lot of times you're going to have more complicated automation that you need to do. So I mentioned there's a lot of stuff that depends on like class and level. So 2 different values that you need to consider. And if you try writing that out as an ifs formula, it's going to get really long and error prone and ugly. So what you want to do is put all that information into a table and then look it up when you need it. And this is a lot like looking up a table just in a book. Like, okay, I have classes along the top, levels along the left side, and I'm just going to like move my finger and find the intersection where I want it. Index finger. Hey, index is a function inside your spreadsheet. And this is how you can take a range and then find a particular value from a column and row inside of it. So it's index, range, row, and column are optional. If you don't include them, then what you get is an entire column or row. There's a little widget here for playing around with that. So I have this grid of Greek letters here. And down here I have index, and it's reading these two values. So I can say I want row 1, column 5. That is epsilon. I want row 2, column 5. That goes down 1 and gets lambda. I want row 2, column 1. Or I want everything in row 2. There's the second row of the table down here, right? So this is kind of the workhorse for pulling data out of a range. Now, the trick is, how do you know what row and column you want to use when you're looking this up? Again, I apologize. I am going to be moving pretty quick here, and this is some of the more complicated stuff, but we'll press on. Match is the function that you want to use to try to find that row and column value. So the way that works is you give it a key, the thing that you are searching for. You give it a range to search. That range needs to be either a single column or a single row, and Match will go through and try to find the location or position of the best match for the key that you gave it. And so this is, I'll break that down, but this is how you are going to get the row and column numbers for index to use. Best match is kind of a weird thing. I recommend checking out the documentation for it. Basically, or you can play around with this when I unprotect it. But I have this this table here. There's 3 columns. These are just unsorted values. Here's some numbers that are in ascending order. Here's some numbers in descending order. And I can play around with my match function. So right now I'm trying to find, that doesn't make any sense. Here we go. I'm trying to find the best match for 500 in the ascending range. Type 1 search means I want to find the largest value less than or equal to 500. And I can tell by looking at it, that's going to be 337. And that is 1, 2, 3 rows down. Hey, look, position is 3. Now, if I change this to 0, the 1, 0, -1 are terrible ways to like name parameters. Like, you just have to remember what they're used for. 0 is exact match. So there isn't a 500 in this column, so it tells me it's not there. Now, if I want to look up a thief in the unsorted column, that's a perfect time to use exact match. Thief is in row 4. Again, moving pretty quickly here, but you use match to try to find things. There's different options for whether your range is sorted and if you want an exact match or not. But these two functions are the Swiss Army knife of doing table lookups because you can use them together. So I have this example here of, I actually have a table now. There's a header. There's headings, so we have columns labeled A, B, C, D, E, F. We have rows labeled 0, 2, 4, 6 because it makes it more interesting. And I am going to do index of Greek table. For the row, I want to match whatever's in row key, and I am doing the greatest value less than or see, I have trouble remembering this too. The largest value less than or equal to whatever row key is. That's what this 1 at the end here means. For column, I'm looking for column D, and I want it to be an exact match. So I go, okay, 5. There isn't a 5, so I settle on 4. I want to find what's in column D. It's pi. I can change this to 4. Doesn't change anything. Stop trying to be helpful. There we go. And I get omega? No. I don't remember. Whatever this Greek letter is. But yeah, basically index, I have the table that I'm looking things up in. I'm trying to match a row. I'm using index again to extract the first column. So this part here gives me this. I'm searching for 1 in this column, and I'm going to give you the position of 0 because that's the best match. For the next one, I am pulling out the first row. That's A, B, C, D, E, F. I'm searching for C there, and I want an exact match, and that is giving me a gamma. Now, if you lay out your tables following a convention, you can hide all of this behind a named function and not have to think about it again. But basically, you're composing these two functions in multiple ways in order to come up with your own sort of lookup function that works for what you're trying to do. So we're using index to extract a header, row, or column for match to use. And then we're using match to get row and column positions for index to use. They work together. It's peanut butter and jelly. It's great stuff. Yep. So just real quickly show you, I have this data tab where I have these big tables. And let's say I want to know how much, what level a character is based on their experience. Well, they're a hunter. They have 40,000 XP. That probably gives me this row. And then I search over here. That's level 6. Quick example. Data tables. So this is where we learn about how to set up that kind of thing. So index and match give you a lot of flexibility. You can compose them in various ways to solve different problems. The best way to set up your data tables is the way that makes your formulas as simple as possible. And that's probably different from how tables are presented in the books. So if you do like old school essentials, Dolman Wood, anything Gavin Norman does, he uses these control panel type layouts where as all of the information about this particular class is in one big table. You have your experience values for each level. You have how many hit dice they have, attack values, saving throws, all of that. It's just in one big table. So it's all grouped by class. That's fine. It's a little hard to work with. I'll show some examples of that. The other way to do it, and the way that I think is preferred for this use, because you are, remember, the reason we're doing all this is because there's a particular field on a character sheet that we want to fill a value in for. So we should set up tables for everything that could appear in that field and nothing else. And that's what grouping by field is. So instead of having, okay, we have a fighter advancement table, we have one for friars, we have one for magicians. No, we have one table that has attack bonuses for every class laid out. This will be much simpler, but I'll start with the first one because if you're a reader reading a book, it's probably better, arguably. So grouping data by class, the first problem you're going to run into is, okay, I have this attack modifier box, and that value is going to change depending on what class it is. Crap. Now, the first thing I need to do is figure out what table I'm looking at. So I have cleric advancement table, I have fighter advancement table, I have magician advancement table. I gave them names following a convention. There's a function I can use called indirect that I can use with the string concatenation. So I can take this class over here, I can stick advancement on the end, and what indirect is going to do is basically go find that named range that I just built the name of. So I'm using it down here. I'm going to change this to fighter, and the table changes. I'm going to change it to magician. It changes again. So you can use this to dynamically build a table name, and then you can write this big, horrible function that I'm not going to try to break apart that uses indirect class and advancement 3 different times to try to pull information from whatever class table you pick over here. You can make it work. There is always a way to make it work. You're going to hate yourself. So instead, group that information by field. You're going to have a bunch of different tables. I have a separate big table for every type of saving throw for every class in Dolmen Wood. So that's like 5 different tables. It's fine. The computer's the one that's looking through it. And this formula, much, much easier to break apart. So I have my class, I have my level. I know I just need to look at the attack bonuses table. If I understand index and match, which I've gone over very quickly, so you may or may not. I know the rows, the first thing here are levels. I'm trying to do an exact match in this case for level. I'm trying to match class along the columns. So as I change these, let's say I'm a level 2 fighter, level 3 fighter, I'm a level 3 magician, that just gets updated. This all works because I've decided as a convention, the values in the first row and the first column are my search keys. These are the things I want to match against. And this formula is so useful, I just give it a name. I call it TLOOKUP for table lookup. All right. And that means I can just replace this formula up here. TLOOKUP, attack bonuses, row is going to be that. I didn't name these fields. And now I know that I'm doing a lookup on the attack bonuses table. If I had used named ranges for the class and level, I would know that the lookup is based on class and level. Makes it much easier when you're going back and reading later on. Who is texting me? I apologize if you're picking that up. So yeah, table lookup. You do. Yeah, so you do need to add. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, so you can add another column in row or more rows onto a table to expand this later on, and all of your formulas will keep working. You will have to update any named ranges for the table as well, but that's fine. And then that will fix it everywhere for you if you're adding a new class. Yep. The other kind of lookup, and I know we're getting near the end of time. I did kind of quickly walk through figuring out level from experience. And in that case, you aren't matching against what's in the first column of the table. So here I have levels, experience needed for that level. This is what I would call a reverse lookup. And this is where you can get a little bit crazy. So I want to find and pull out the column for the class that I picked, so that I can work from that for searching. And that's what this formula here does. So I'm using index on this table. I'm using 0 for the row, which means I want an entire column. I'm not looking for just a value in a particular row. I want all of them. And in spreadsheet terms, apparently 0 means all. So I'm going to look for the column that matches class, and index experience for level 10 means I'm searching the first row for whatever my class here is. So down here, if I pick fighter, this changes. And this is not often used, but it's kind of verbose. So I call that tcol for column. And this is my utility function for pulling a particular column out of a table by the value in its header. So whatever the column's name is, like this is the fighter column. If I put in fighter, tcol will give me that whole column. Next step, we have that. Now we want to match a value in the column that we just pulled out and get the level from the first column. So that's what this does. Again, index, we're working with the experience for level table. We're trying to match experience from the class column for whatever our class is. It is, I'm using 1 here, so these experience values need to be sorted. And I'm pulling out the value in the first column, so that would be the level. So let's see how it works. I'm a fighter. I have 2,500 experience. I'm level 2. I have 5,000 experience. I'm level 3. I have 40 experience. I'm level 1. And that all works. And I usually call that function RLOOKUP for reverse lookup. Now I know we're getting near the end of time. I'm happy to keep going on, and I can show you how this is used in practice in my Dolmenwood sheet. But if anybody needs to drop for a game or because you're bored, I totally understand. But that is all I have for like the crunchy technical bit of this. And I went super fast. Any questions about any of that? Yeah. Yeah. I can walk through some examples here, and a lot of times it's actually pretty simple. I'll start with save targets here. Why aren't these formulas? Here, I'll do it from here. That's weird. I think I must have messed something up in this sheet. I must have at some point, or someone did. But this one works. So there's a magic resistance as a kind of like a saving throw bonus that applies in Dolmenwood. So I'm using, and I may have, I think in this sheet was an older one, so the order of the arguments is a little different. I should have come back standardize it. But I'm looking at my magic resistance by kindred table, trying to match a kindred. Okay, so yeah, this doesn't depend on level. I'm looking for the column named MR, the first. All right, this example sucks. Let's see if I have a better one. That's RLOOK. TLOOK, here we go. So the amount of experience needed for the next level. So whatever level I am, what's the amount of XP I need to get to the next level? Well, in that case, I'm looking at the experience for level by class table. I'm looking for whatever my level is +1, and it depends on my class. So then I go over to here. I'm a cleric. I'm level 3, so I'm looking at what a cleric needs for level 4. That's 6,000. Right? And it's really just a matter of going through bit by bit on your sheet and figuring out, okay, how do I get the value that I need based on what I already have? How can I put those things together? Sometimes it's I just write a formula. Sometimes it is I build a table and I look the values up from that. And it's, finding all of the little unspoken rules and corner cases that are inherent in game design that you need to understand in order to automate those things. And to give you a sense, I have a lot of tables in here because I have a lot of fields that I am filling out automatically. Like the skill targets. Every character has these 3. Some classes add additional ones, and that value is, I'm actually doing a little bit more math here. because there's like a default, and then maybe your value gets better as you, depending on what kindred you have or what class and level you are. So I need to look at, okay, well, what is their kindred? What is their level and class? What is the minimum score? Because lower is better. And like that's how I get this number of 5 for a listen target for a wood grew. And likewise, I'm just going through like climb wall is just for thieves. It's the 4th skill target for this character sheet because it's 4th on my list. That's just how it happened to be. So I have a table called data skill 4 target at level by class. Makes sense to me. It doesn't have to make sense to you. I'm the one that wrote it. And yeah, then it's just a simple table lookup. And that table, skill 4, doesn't have all the classes. So if you have a class that doesn't have this skill, you just don't get anything. I think I put in like a if NA to like, so if there's an error, it just doesn't put anything. But yeah, if you're a bard, enchanter, hunter, magician, thief, then you have the skill. If you don't, nobody else does. And then there's another table to actually get the name of the 4th skill for whatever that class is. So a lot of this, just a lot of data tables, a lot of formulas involved just to try to make this as smooth as possible. Yeah, I mean, neatness counts, I think, just so you can find things later on. But yeah, I was rearranging things fairly often, and it's an iterative thing of as well. So like you're going section by section, figuring out automating things, adding tables as needed, going back and forth until you're happy with it. I haven't even gotten into this other kind of table here, which I call a filter table. And instead of trying to key off of this top row at all, basically you're filtering this table down by, okay, I just care about Bregles right now, and I only care about things that are for level 6 or below. And then this is how we end up populating this table down here. So that is, I have a T filter function that I wrote that because I have some conventions for how I laid out my table, I can write the formula once and then give it a name and then just tell it, okay, I'm looking at the traits by kindred and level for this character who has this kindred, this level, and for this column, I just want the name value. And then over here, I want the description. And I didn't get into the filter function, but that's okay. And I think we're at just about at time. Yeah, I'll admit it. This is probably the nerdiest way to participate in a nerdy hobby. And yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think it's fine. If that's what's helping you, if that's it'll work for you. I think the only risk is if you want to, okay, so the question was about using AI assistants to help you write these formulas and stuff. And I think that's fine. If your goal is to just get a thing that works, if you want to also learn how to do it for yourself over time, then you have to be aware of, is this actually teaching me or is it just doing it for me? And it's not like an either or really, it's a little bit of both. So it's whatever is effective for you to learn or reach whatever your goal is for this. I think that's fine. It's at best, it's kind of like having a mentor sitting over your shoulder and like giving you help as you're going. And I think that's great. Mm-hmm. I will unprotect these sheets so you can go in and play around with them. There were some widgets in there to help you kind of figure out how match and index in particular work, because they can be confusing at first, but they're extremely powerful and flexible. So that's in there. I do also recommend checking out some of these resources. And I'm always on Discord, so if you have any questions about any of this, feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to talk spreadsheets for at least an hour and a half, as demonstrated. All right.